Games, board games. I might be talking about board games with Tom Truman, but I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off this streaming with a little bit of singing, and today we're having a chat about life and games and self-publishing and all that. And we are going to hopefully have a hope for UK Games Expo is a bit more than a joke. Sorry about the terrible rhymes, but good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever it is, wherever you are. I am Bez. It's 10 a.m.-ish. Time for Bezzy Beats and Board Game Blether. And today we are meeting Tom Truman. Hello, Tom.
Hey, hello.
And I kind of really got to know you when I think we met briefly at Hercon, and I was hoping to see you at Hereford, but you've just had so much going on with like your full-time job and preparing for a Kickstarter and putting the final touches together for everything. So understandably, we're just like, this is too much. But hopefully, you know, I'll see you there next year, fingers crossed, because at UK Games Expo, as you know, it's just so manic that hey, the most we'll get to do is probably a quick wave as I run past your stand.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because with Aircon, I kind of just like jumped at you at the end of the show, you know, as you were packing up, and you know, you're already inundated with people and so on. I was like, hey, I want to say hey to Bez, you know, like, you know, I'm always seeing you at every event basically. So I thought I'd introduce myself, and then yeah, with the Mega Day, like it looked really like it looked like a really nice event, like, and I was basically, you know, to me, yeah, I have you don't know until you do a Kickstarter just how much work goes into a Kickstarter, and I just didn't really know how busy I'd be. So it was a real shame. But you know, Adam is amazing about it, and you know, I've just said like, you know, I'm definitely gonna try and come down after Kickstarter's finished. So you know, and I know yeah, that like, you know, if you're there as well, then we'll be able to kind of hang out then. UKGE. Yes, like that's super busy, and I can imagine we're both going to look very tired, and there'll be tears in our eyes of joy, and
hopefully
also
not tears. Look, yeah, Adam and Elaine were super lovely. I missed my train. I was like super down. I was just honestly, I think, yeah, because I've said I'll do a new game for, or at least one new game for every convention. So at UK Games Expo, compared to since Aircon, like I've done 3 totally new games because I've been at Norwich, I've been in Hereford, that new game,
yeah,
UK Games Expo, new game, and also re-implementations of some new games. So new cute comical creatures instead of wee whimsical creatures. If you want something that's a bit more cute, I drew 80 creatures in like a couple of days, but like that was a couple of days of basically no sleep and not doing anything else. But yeah, they are super lovely. Like I was tired. I was like, oh, I didn't make it on the train that I was meant to make. I would like to come tomorrow. Is that okay? And they were like, don't worry, we'll pick you up. But if you can't make it, we just were happy to have you supporting us. And it made me feel good. I honestly, it was stressing me out. I get easily stressed about the travel. I always get stressed about things beforehand. And even like, so this is my 5th, 6th UK Games Expo, and like probably I've done like 12, 20 different conventions total. Like it's still always a bit stressful because you want each thing to be special. I do want to give a quick shout out to Poison Paint Factory. Thank you for joining us. It's lovely to see you. You're a new viewer, and so welcome to the channel. I don't know if you know this person, Tom.
Yeah, this is actually a pretty amazing miniature painter who I literally bumped into through doing the social media on Instagram for Trolls and Rerolls, and yeah, you just meet some amazing people in the community, and you know, and he's one of them. So yeah.
That's lovely to hear. And of course, Timmy, it is just such a delight to have you and making this a more international experience all the way from Nova Scotia. And
Wow.
even though, like, I hate the fact that you've got this insomnia, it is just such a delight to have you with us. Lots of love to you. But yes, as always, I would like to take a bit of a step back and talk about some recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights, recent highlights. So, what have we been up to? Like, for me, I'll just talk about the past day, but Tom, what have you been up to in the last week? So, yesterday, I was, as people might know, going to playtest. We had 3 newcomers. One was Charlotte, who was just there for the last test and didn't play anything. One was Alan Pearce, who was there for the full day. And we don't normally put a newcomer first, but it just works out with the numbers. So they joined for the first slot. And another person was Alex, who's a designer whose favorite game is Twilight Imperium to such an extent that they started selling off all their other games. Anyway, so this is Alan's game, all about choosing which moon you're going to, trying to stay out of the way of other people, and if you're lucky and you manage to predict maybe what other people are doing, then you'll win the game. I also played a game by Sebastian Bleasdale, which people might know through On the Underground or Keyflower, and lots of other games. This was a very mathsy game. It was very complicated, but a lot to chat about. Here's my game. Ignore the cards. These cards are for one of my recent games that came out a week ago at Hereford, a game about counting cats' shapes and colors that keeps getting trickier. But the game that I'm testing here is about trying to entice animals over to your tableau of landmass. So imagine that the ones with the little colored icons are your landmass, and these are things that the big animals are striving for. So then the big card says, hey, we want the most dancing cats on your landmass. And if you've got the most dancing cats on your landmass, then they come over and are like, hey, this is a great place to settle down. And when you draft, you don't get to draft them directly. You get to put the points between you and someone else, and then you have to battle over them, if you know what I mean. And it seemed to work well enough to be worth now making a proper prototype of. And I'm really fortunate that I'm like, the thing about making a game out of existing cards means that it's just a wee bit faster to get to the table. We were able to like play 5, 6 very quick games, just see how it works. And then at the end, it's like, okay, this is all the things that's wrong with the cards. Now I can actually start working on that, because the fundamental flow of the game is just a question of, is this interesting at all? And we had lots of other games. Ellie had some games, and so Perrin had some games, but it was just a lovely day. So that's me. What have you been up to, Tom?
So first of all, Bez, you've already just said how many games you've made in such a small amount of time. Like, for anyone who doesn't make games, that is an incredibly huge amount of work that you've done to make that many games that function in that amount of time. So kudos to you, because I couldn't do that.
Thank you very much. I am intensely privileged, because I'm going to say, unfairly dismissed from my last job in 2014, and when I signed on, the person that I was, my key worker was like, okay, let me refer you to this person because I had some. And then this new person said, you know what? If you aren't looking for work, but you're actually trying to set up a business, that's fine. I'll kind of let you do that, even though like there's a lot of stuff that things aren't really geared up for. And I've gotten to the place where my first game, now known as Yogi, is successful enough that it does just about pay for my rent. And I am incredibly successful in that regard, incredibly fortunate that I am able to do this full time. So I don't have to worry about a family or another job. I was working for a month at a board game cafe, but then I only wanted to work maybe 2 days a week. They wanted me to work maybe 3, maybe 4 days a week. And I said, look, after like a week of being there, I said, look, it's December. I understand you really need people. I'm not going to leave you in the lurch, but I'm going to quit at the end of the year, like whenever is a good time for you. because I clearly knew my stuff. I was a good worker, I believe, but I just finishing up at 11:30, going home, falling asleep, and then having to get up the next day at like 5 a.m. for Dragon Meet. That's just no good. Then, at a convention, you'd want to, so working retail, and it doesn't quite jive with conventions, unfortunately.
No, not at all. I've experienced the same kind of perils with doing a Kickstarter whilst also working, and it's real tough. Like it, and I, the lockdown in a weird way gave an opportunity for creatives to be able to kind of have a legitimate opportunity, which I think a lot of us don't. We always have to work really hard and do a lot of, you're always having to worry about the bills and worry about the, are you gonna have enough money at the end of the month, and you're working a million hours. It's very hard to prioritize yourself in that. And so and I think the lockdown in a weird way gave, if there was any silver lining, then one of them would be that, at least it gave people an opportunity to kind of readjust their lives a little bit and say, you know what, I'm going to focus on me. I'm going to focus on what I want to do.
It definitely gave people pause to think, and to think what's valuable to you. And for some people, just managing to survive. Frankly, we have all managed to survive this great travesty, and it does have a knock-on effect on mental health. Yes. I mean, I started streaming as a coping mechanism because, the day after Aircon, when all the lockdown was announced, and I had this sad conversation with Sally Jones saying, oh my gosh, I'm just really upset that I can't go dancing this week, and probably can't go playtest this week. And Sally was like, yeah, I had this date and I can't do it. And we both were swing dancers, just so much fun moving your body and just enjoying the rhythm and it. But then obviously all of that stuff was out of the way. And Vincent Weiss, your illustrator, hello Vincent, it's lovely to see you, but please don't sleep when you're driving. That seems really problematic. But when we're going through all of that and we're like, what is important to us? And for me, it was people. Can we just play some games? Let's get together at, I don't know, 7 p.m. on Tuesday, because that's tomorrow, and then I'll make a thing that we can play. And then for a while, it was 3 times a week that we were playing Wits and Wagers and Say Anything, and some established party games, some things that you could do on a Zoom call like this, and some things that I invented myself. And then at a certain point, that started dying down, but I also noticed I was getting out of bed at maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or it was getting later and later, because Friday, normally that's the one day when I'm like, okay, I need to be out. I need to go to the playtesting and conventions. That keeps me on a normal body clock and seeing people. But someone actually recommended, hey, why don't you start a daily stream in the morning? That might get you out of bed. And so, let me do that. And I worked out what time is appropriate, what time would I actually be able to get out of bed for, what time is other stuff not happening. Okay, 10 a.m. And then I have had some breaks, but it's basically kept going. And it's been such a valuable thing to have conversations like this. Yeah. But I don't want to say that I did loads after lockdown. It was basically I did almost no design for 1.5 years. And then last year, came up with, I started really getting into it again, started going to physical playtests. And again, you compliment me and I appreciate that. But I just want to talk about what privileges I have to do this full time.
I understand that. And in the grand scheme of things anyway, game design, is one of a very small number of issues that are, in a lot of our lives, we're dealing with a lot more problems at the moment. So I think it's with doing games and trying to set up your own business, I think it's a kind of double whammy of if you're in the right position to be able to do it, that's amazing, and that is a privilege, definitely. And then the other side is, okay, but now it's actually super stressful and hard work and a million hours. So then you kind of have these kind of weird counterbalance. So it's kind of it's a weird one. But yeah, in terms of what I've been doing for the last week, I'm sad to say, Kickstarter prep basically, and a lot of reaching out to emails. Like, a lot of this part now is just getting like up to date quotes again and kind of making sure that like it hasn't changed too much and just kind of finalizing stuff. But it has been as you know, there's like the last like 3 or 4 weeks, like I was quite overwhelmed with the amount of kind of pressure that the Kickstarter brings. And actually in the last about 3 weeks, like I've been able to kind of push through that wall and kind of just feel like, what, it's it's a weird thing to describe to people. I don't know, it's very difficult to kind of to sum up the feeling. And I think there's certain feelings that you or experiences that you can go through that other people need to have gone through it as well to understand. Like, and I actually think about not to go too deep, but like my father passed away when I was younger, and it's just an experience that like there's nothing else that's ever compared to that. And this is a similar kind of thing, not as bad, but it's a kind of there's so many weird feelings and emotions and pressure around doing a Kickstarter that you ultimately, it's very hard to explain to someone who's not doing it how it is. Even from afar, it can look like it's actually doable and you're doing a great job, but internally you're kind of like just like a mess. You know what I mean? And
it's kind of like the swan that's putting in all this effort, and then if you just see it from above the water, it's just like, wow, this is this graceful thing gliding along, but it's frantically paddling its feet, struggling.
Yeah, and that is a really good analogy actually. And I think so, but like I said, that kind of wall that I think, and I have spoken to a lot of other creators, and obviously, you Bez, you have experience in this as well, is that this month before the launch is like the toughest kind of part, is the part which really, kind of puts the pressure on you. So I was kind of forewarned it would be like that, but I just didn't know until I'd got into it just how tough it'd be. And as you said, having to manage a million things in your life, it is quite a lot happens at the same time. It can be overwhelming. So but like I said, it's now like it's gone over that wall and it's just lots and lots of work. And so I'm feeling really good about it. It's just being a lot of admin, a lot of sitting in front of InDesign and having to learn how to use InDesign in a very quick amount of weeks, and having to sit in front of Final Cut Pro and learn how to use Final Cut Pro in a couple of weeks. And I think that's actually one of the things about a Kickstarter that's so stressful is, and I think that you have to not only do a million things, and it normally has to be you doing a million things, but also you have to become really good at a lot of things very quickly. And you have to become this amazing marketeer, this amazing publisher, this amazing events manager and events organizer, this amazing demoer, this amazing playtester who can, and a networker, and an amazing illustrator, artist, graphic designer, and all this stuff. And you kind of come out of it like, what skills what's left to learn at this point, like kind of karate, like I mean, like like what exactly have I got left that I have to learn for this? Because you have to learn so many things.
I mean, I totally get what you're saying, and let's not overstate it. I mean, there are opportunities to definitely collaborate with other people. I mean, you, as I understand it, you don't do your own illustrations. It is Vincent Vi for the game.
So Vincent does the illustrations, and I also have someone working with me on the graphic design side of things. But when I say illustration, I'm talking about like other kind of stuff you have to make for like kind of posts or stuff like that, or kind of like weird, like I had to physically make the prototypes, for example, and to make them to a proper standard. It was
there's sorry, pardon me. Normally, this is just what's going on in the past few days, but there's just been such an upwelling of emotions in the past few minutes from you. and saying, this is all I need to do, and I'm so embroiled in this Kickstarter stuff, and that makes total sense. But let's take a step back and rewind and contextualize it. So, correct me if I'm wrong, this is your first game?
It is, yeah.
And so you are having to learn art direction, and who else is actually working with you? I mean, we understand that you've got a support network. I hope that you've got a loving family and friends around you, of course. And you've got plenty of playtesters that you've played with. But as part of the core team of people who've done something beyond that, who is actually doing stuff for this game?
So at the moment, there's 4 of us. There's me who, well, let me start with the others actually. So Vincent, who does the artwork, and then we have, and he's very good at doing his artwork. He's a very good artist. And then Maya, who is a graphic designer, and she's been helping kind of get stuff ready for print. And then Joe, who he is kind of my logistics support. Essentially, he's like the kind of person who he's done a Kickstarter for. He knows a lot about shipping, and we have a lot of chats about that and prices and stuff. And then basically everything else is me. So it's that's the kind of core team.
And this is not a small game. I mean, when I started, I deliberately chose to do the smallest game possible, which was a deck of about 54 cards, which at the time it ended up being 56, because that was the print size that Cards Monday used.
Yeah.
But this is not just a deck of cards. So what exactly are you making in terms of production, in terms of what's going to be in the box? How much do you need to raise on Kickstarter? What are your objectives with this? Yeah, let's go with that.
So yeah, in terms of the scale of the campaign, like when I was designing it, I felt like I had a couple of games on the go, and I was trying to think which would be the one that people might invest in on Kickstarter and feel excited about and want to back, and this was the one that kind of came through. In terms of kind of what's in the box, there's quite a lot of things in there. Like, we've tried to mostly use cardboard components only. We're trying to, as best as possible on a very tight budget, try and do the most kind of eco plan we can do in terms of fulfillment. But the nature of kind of doing it at our level is, unfortunately, the infrastructure isn't there for our price range, and so we have to kind of jump through certain hoops and do certain things that if you're a bit more established, you could actually make more choice on. You'd be more in control of that process. And then the funding target, it's going to be, and I say so it's going to be around 15k, and okay. I say that as a round because we are still getting the latest quotes back in this week, basically. So I don't want to say that is it, but essentially that's where we've been sitting for a long time with it, and that's where we've probably...
And that's designed to cover your forthgoing costs, the print costs, and all the shipping. Is that how you've worked that out?
So between that covers the manufacturing and the freight, and then we when we get those quote backs, if it says if that price has gone up because of the very volatile shipping situation, then we'll be looking to increase that essentially.
Mm-hmm. And doing a big box, I mean, you need a lot of people for this, and I see that you do have over 700 followers on the Kickstarter campaign right now. I mean, many congratulations. That's really exciting. And again, can I, if you're willing to share, I know you're getting quotes back, but based on your last quote, what is the unit cost and what is your expected RRP, Kickstarter price? How much will people be paying to get the game?
So the game will be roughly £40,
okay.
the base game, and then the unit price, it really depends on how many stretch goals get unlocked. And there are a few other pledges, so I can't really go into specifics of that. But it is something that essentially, it's not like drastically high. We're not looking at it being.
So it's in line with the normal multipliers that you need to then get it into retail if retailers are interested.
Yeah, and I've kind of chatted to a few different distributors, and there's been some sort of there's been a few kind of discussions about whether or not it hits a certain point, whether or not we could sell on the games for retail. So it kind of really depends on how well the campaign goes.
Hello, Josie. Lovely to see you. Hope you're well. And yeah, I just want to couch all of this in the fact that, just to, again, contextualize it, this is your first campaign. You've done a lot of work. You have been to UK Games Expo before, as we can see here. And actually, let's just go totally off script. How was UK Games Expo? Was this the start of your paid marketing, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Like, basically, that was the first event that we did, and literally to about a week before. So that prototype you see there, that didn't exist about a week beforehand. I had to physically make that in a very with some friends, and to basically get that to kind of a point where we could bring it out. But we had the cards. We did order the cards, and then yeah, basically. But it had been playtested a lot on Tabletop Simulator, and had been going kind of back and forth on that for about 8 months. So it's kind of had a lot of play time. But this is the first time that we actually had a physical version on the table, and it was actually quite kind of weird to kind of see it in the flesh. It was kind of strange to see it on a table, and then I didn't actually get to play it first. So it sounds really strange, but because Todd, who's an amazing demo, he was sitting there helping out. He led the first demo, so actually I didn't get a chance to play the game until probably Saturday. So it was really strange to kind of like be talking about, hey, here's my game, like, here's this amazing thing, and that I had obviously worked on it very hard and so on. But then the physical version, I was like, you're playing it before I am.
Wow, so it sounds like all of the playtesting up until this point had been digital.
Yeah, it had been, and that was mostly down to the lockdown. Basically, it was mostly down,
of course,
to quarantine and so on. So it was only until I think that's when it started easing up with UKG. And I remember UKG was a very they were trying to feel how to approach the situation, because obviously some people were saying we don't want to have masks if we don't have to, and some people were saying I'm not going if you don't wear masks, and like so and ultimately they ended up kind of after kind of the public voiced their concern, they ended up putting that kind of restriction in. But I remember there was questions about whether or not it would even go ahead, I think
it was a really strong show and a set of really strong decisions from the directors. Hello, Matt, saying, so this is Matt who, speaking of UK Games Expo, I don't know if you know, the Offline Gamer makes this amazing map of the UK Games Expo where rather than having just the numbers, they put the people's names on there, but you do need to zoom in, so it's a bit more digital. And apparently you've already been supporting this. But
yeah,
yes,
he's great. I have actually checked out their podcast. Like they're like you, they're very active. So yeah, they're great.
I mean, I don't think anyone streams as much as, well, some people, no one in the board game space streams as much.
Don't want to take your crown away here.
I should probably get a pre-UK Games Expo haircut. Yeah, you know what? It's like it'll make me feel good. I'll get just a small trim. But enjoy your haircuts. Anyway, let's move on to our next regular bit, which is, of course, brilliant thing, brilliant thing. What's a little thing which is brilliant? Why is Kickstarter a brilliant thing? Why did you choose to do Kickstarter?
For indie publishers, starting publishers, Kickstarter is a good place to set yourself up to an audience that's very big. Under the watchful eye of Bez. But outside of Kickstarter, some brilliant things that are not Kickstarter related is tea. I like drinking a lot of tea. That is my go-to vice. If there's anything, I probably drink about 15 cups a day at the moment. So that's a brilliant thing. And
15,
then
1-5.
1-5.
That sounds excessive. I mean, are you like concerned about the caffeine or like the amount of diuretics that's in there?
I should probably, and I feel like once July is here, and July is like my kind of peaceful, tranquil moment where I can lay on the grass and stop drinking tea. But until then, I'm not there yet.
I mean, to be fair, if you're drinking tea as a coping mechanism, it's a lot healthier than what I do, which is like having an occasional bit of chocolate with sugar in it. So, I mean, I feel better about 100% because at least that doesn't have any sugar in it. And although even that's got the caffeine. But, yesterday I was like, okay, I'm going to buy myself a wee treat. And just like I try to avoid sugar, but I don't manage it. So frankly, if tea is your vice, then you're doing well.
Yeah, I do. I had to say it to my partner. I think she looks at she looks at my lifestyle at the moment and is quite concerned. So but like I said, I'm hoping to kind of get back into running and kind of being healthy again. And kind of become a bit more active in July. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, that sounds good. And make sure you give yourself plenty of time, like overreach by a couple of months, like better to under-promise and over-deliver, as they say.
Yes,
let's move on to questionably quick questions. Is the next section. It's not an interrogation. It's just a questionably quick questions section. So if you've got any questionably quick questions for Tom, then feel free to fire them in. Otherwise, I'm going to ask you some things. Josie says, unless it's tea with free sugars, do you have sugar in your tea? That's a fair question. I was just assuming herbal tea and green tea.
No, it's Yorkshire tea, and it's no sugar.
Okay. Any milk?
I oat milk with no sugar in.
Okay, good to know. So that's the first question out of today. Second question: what pen do you use? Do you have a favorite pen?
I don't. I just use whichever bio I can find. At a push, I will use Flint.
Okay. Radish or beetroot? Which is the better vegetable?
Oh, that's a tough one. Beetroot is, I'd say, tastier in my opinion, but there is something about a pickled radish that's really nice.
And also the beetroot's got the turning everything red. That's cool. Do you prefer books or podcasts?
To be fair, podcasts probably. I'd like to do more reading, but I just don't. It's a lot harder to find the time to read an entire book compared to being able to do stuff whilst listening to a podcast. And
which was the last podcast you listened to?
I listened to Nick Abbott. He does a lot of kind of very funny podcasts, and he just kind of like does satire about British society and how we're kind of like all the things that ultimately I think everyone kind of just looks at and goes, this is ridiculous, and so he kind of highlights them. So he's his either the whole show or Nick Abbott Habit, they're both really good.
That sounds fantastic. You can't remember the name of the show?
Oh no, so it's Nick Abbott Habit is his kind of like little
Nick Abbott's Habit.
Yeah, it's that's his short half-hour show, but then because he does a radio show, you can listen to the whole radio show, and that's Nick Abbott the whole show. Okay,
and it sounds like that's a strong recommendation for you.
It's good. It's good.
Okay. Josie says cards or dice.
Cards.
Mm.
Yeah.
If you could only listen to one song forever, what song would that be?
There's a very good song called Stone or Lavender by Hiatus Coyote. That song is really good. I have been listening on loop a trashy 80s motivational playlist, which has been keeping me kind of going, like living in a constant montage. I am listening to all those songs forever, it feels like, and it's not always by choice.
So, Living in a Constant Montage is the name of the song that you are listening to over and over again right now. And the one by Hiatus Coyote, what was that called?
Stone or Lavender.
Stone or Lavender.
Yeah.
Oh, this is an interesting question. If you could break the law and get away with it, what would you do?
I mean, it's a really hard one. Like, that's you stumped me, Poison.
I mean, I would instantly be thinking, okay, let me just reshape the world to my imagination. But like, I would make some fairly big changes to government, and I'd just wander into the governmental offices, and start. I'd try to do it in a measured, scientific way, like start kind of scrapping certain things, like
yeah.
And I try to learn like what I actually need to rip up or whatever to make sure that that law doesn't happen for anyone else, and like basically changing the laws to my vision.
Yeah, that to be fair, that's actually a very good one. Like, I think, changing the voting law, for example, that'd be great. Like, yeah.
What would be your preferred voting law? Would it be just to direct total number of people that vote in the country, get that percentage, and that's the percentage of seats that are given to that party?
Potentially, but I think first past the post is definitely not representing our society properly anymore. I don't think. Not to go too much into that side of things.
Yeah, let's have something more upbeat. What's a positive skill that you would love to have?
I've been getting better at cooking, but I'd like to be really good at cooking. Like, I'd like to be able to just kind of, there are some, I don't know how to do it, like kind of like cut things up and kind of do things really like pro and really quick, and they just know what things to go where. And yeah, there are some people who are just very good at cooking, and I'd like to be that.
You want to be like super good at the chopping, just have all the knowledge for how long to marinate things for and what seasoning goes with what and everything.
Yes.
Mm.
Just the chopping, not the taste.
And thank you, Poison Paint. So let's get a bit more backwards. Let's go into childhood. What is your first memory that you're willing to share?
My very first memory. I can remember climbing I can remember two memories actually. I can remember climbing a fence, like a chain link fence, as like a kid in nursery, and then basically just falling off it, and like I end up like cracking my head open. I was like, why? I guess that's probably why I remember it. But like that was probably not an amazing memory. And then there's also, I used to my best friend, who's actually still my best friend now, and we were maybe 4 years old, 5 years old this time. We're kind of like hanging out on the roof of a kind of play thing or whatever. And I remember we used to play look at the sky and say, which cloud is God behind? And like we'd see like, because there'd be like a silver lining behind like where the sun was on the cloud, and we're like, that's the one. And although I'm not necessarily religious, I just enjoy the fact that like that was like a really innocent part when you're a kid, kind of just hanging out, chatting like that. And I also like the fact that I've had that kind of connection with someone for my life.
So would you say that you were brought up in a religious manner?
No, not at all. Like, I mean, both my parents were religious, but for me, I wasn't. It was never like kind of put onto me at all. So yeah.
And going into board games, what was the first game that you remember playing? And what was the first one that you fell in love with?
So I would say it's actually possibly the both. So I my brothers used to play an old game called Space Crusade. If you ever played it, which for anyone who does know is like essentially Warhammer's kind of approach of doing a family-friendly kind of like game aimed at kind of younger children. You know, kind of like maybe like 10 or 11 years old.
But it's still got these space marines running around and shooting these aliens.
Yes, yeah. So it's not too family friendly, but it's still, but it's aimed at a younger audience than they would, I think, traditionally go for. But I mean, this is back in the 90s, and yeah, that game, I think my brothers had it, and I remember them playing it. Yeah, and
just for anyone who missed the title, I tried to always get the titles in a couple of times. Space Crusade.
Space Crusade. So the you should be on the trailer for it. Space Crusade. Space Crusade.
I mean, we should be doing this for your game.
Yes, I'm. yeah, I'll get you on there. Yeah. So it was a very fun game to see being played. It was a chance to hang out with my brothers, who they were both like about 7-9 years older than me. So I was kind of always like not like really kind of, you know, they were growing up together, and I was kind of just like baby in comparison. So it was a really nice way to kind of hang out with them and feel like a grown up. And yeah, that was something that yeah, not like an amazing game mechanically or anything. It's like, it's not like a great game in that sense, but it's very nostalgic, and that's has stuck with me for, you know, my kind of whole life. And I still have a copy, and I kind of did a lot of homebrew content for it and stuff. So, you know, that's stuck with me.
I know lots of people fell in love with that, and even in the past few years, I've seen adults coming back to it and saying, yeah, this is still a really good game. But yeah, what was it that made you first think, hey, maybe this is something that I could be making? What was the first game that you actually started designing? Presumably, this isn't the first thing that you ever started.
No, it's been quite a few. So essentially, what that progression from being an adult and kind of, you know, getting into board games as a hobby, and kind of, you know, starting playing more games, and that progression went to lockdown, where I, you know, had a lot of time on furlough, and I was, you know, kind of thinking about, you know, I used to be a musician, and my industry was absolutely dying, you know, and there was no way that I could see a career in that ever again, basically. So I was thinking to myself, well, I'm not too fussed about moving away from music, but I do want to kind of make sure that I'm going into something that I want to do. And I think I'm at that point in my life where I don't want to just kind of float along and kind of, you know, just work any job I can find, but actually push for something I want to do. And yeah, through running, conversely, Hero Quest, which is Space Crusade's kind of fantasy sibling, they've got fantasy. I ran a couple of online campaigns of that over lockdown on Tabletop Simulator with friends, and it was those friends was playing that because they saw how much content I was making, and I was talking about like, oh yeah, well, I don't know what I'm going to do for a job, and they were like, well, you make a lot of like content, like, and this, you make games, that like, are you not going to maybe go do that as a role? And it kind of has that light bulb moment, and I kind of sat down and I was like, right, I'm going to start making some games and see if I can put that creative input that I've put into a lot of things in my life into board games, specifically with the intention of doing it as a potential job. And yeah, like, out of the games that I made, most of them, you know, I brought to the table with friends, and they enjoyed them, and you know, and that kind, and it didn't feel like friendly, kind of being nice. It felt like they were actually having fun. So I felt that was the kind of catalyst, basically. So yeah, there's been a couple before that got me in.
So, like, I mean, it sounds like it was really a passion project, something that allowed you to connect with your friends, and maybe some of the demonstrators that you mentioned. I think, sorry, I can't remember their name. Rob?
Todd.
Todd in this picture,
yes.
with the kind of purple shirt.
Yes.
And yeah, so it becomes then this big group project that you're doing with everyone, and it's a source of togethership. And I think this is also a brilliant thing about Kickstarter, right? Because if you do it correctly, it's not just about getting the game out there to faceless people. It's really about establishing that community. It's really about saying, hey, here's the thing. And in asking people things where people care about it. You can ask, well, which of these would you prefer? Or, hey, we've got this thing coming up, and you take people over the finish line with you. It's kind of weird because really you can't do the entire story of the game anymore, because you can't do a Kickstarter like you could in the old days when a game had no art. I mean, unless you've got a track record or you're asking for like literally £5, then no one's going to back something if it's got no arts. And even if you're asking for £1 or £5, arts will still multiply whatever number of backers you've got by like 10 or more. And so you have to put in that initial investment, but then you still get that celebration when you're crossing the finish line. And so metaphorically, you're on the final stretch, you're running ground a lap, and then you say, okay, everyone, will you join me? Will you be there for my launch party? And that's really what Kickstarter should feel like, a launch party to say, hey, this is what we're doing now. Hey, this is what we're doing now. Oh, there's this decision. I'm not sure. What do you think? But only do that when it's actually relevant, of course. And hey, this is a new character from our thing. Look at this. Isn't this cool? I'm excited for this. Hopefully you're excited to get this. And maybe share like some of the backstories. Like that's a perfect place to talk about how a character came to be or whatever. And
well, there's two sides of that community, and you're completely right, because essentially, and I think this is actually something that you learn through doing it. You know, if you might be part of the community as a gamer, or you might be kind of aware of the community, but actually being kind of in there as a creator and actually kind of and kind of going on that journey. You have to have two sides of that community. You have the public who, you know, as a whole, the board game community is lovely. You know, we you know, I don't feel like this would be the same experience if I was trying to release something in tech, for example, or something like that. You know, I think it would be a very different kettle of fish. And the fact that you kind of see, you kind of, as you said, people are involved in that journey. What's the nicest
toys? I mean, the toy industry is so much more cutthroat. And I think that the fact that these sorts of hobbyist games are, let's be honest, there's not like a massive amount of money to be made. Whereas when you start thinking about proper mass market, then you start getting into people who are legitimately scared of corporate spies and stuff.
Yes, and you wouldn't have that in our side of things, because what people would consider corporate spy is your publisher friend who's going to probably back you. You know, like that's the alternative, you know, that you have when you're in the board game industry, and that goes on to my other.
Like it's kind of like, maybe because it's from the hobbyist angle, because with the tech side, sure, if you're trying to do the next Pebble Watch or something, then that might be a very different community. But let's say Raspberry Pi didn't exist. Raspberry Pi, something where people can code on this tiny, really cheap computer, and it's a really nice community-driven project. I think that with something like that, where it's more geared towards hackers and hobbyists and people who are like, it's more of a enthusiast item rather than a luxury item, if you know what I mean. I think that gets a very different clientele, in the same way that if you were to go straight in with a Simon style game at 200 quid, I think again you would have a very different clientele.
100%. And when I was talking about tech, I was more envisioning like you know, crowdfunders for kind of like I know somebody bought a kind of car cam off their off
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
Kickstarter, and I didn't seem like they'd done community building or community orientated. It was literally a shop that they were trying to sell this item. Whereas that was a really good example with the Raspberry Pi, because there's actually there are examples in each industry, video games and so on, where you kind of have a community project, and that's what I think is the make or breaker for an indie publisher. And I think that's something I didn't quite. I was trying to build a community last year at the start in January, February, March, and so on. But actually, it was only until we postponed because of the shipping crisis and avoiding the shipping prices that gave us the chance to actually really get to build the community and really get to know the community and really, kind of get involved and kind of do the events and kind of, I mean, almost at every expo, you must have this all the time. You see the same faces. You see a lot of people who you've met in other events, and you say, "Hey, hi, how you doing?" And and kind of like, "Oh yeah," and people go up and say, "Oh, do you remember we played your game back at." I said Dragon Meat or something, or maybe not Dragon Meat, but like Aircorn or
Why not Dragon Meat?
Oh well, because I was sitting at a table when they couldn't play the game with me at the time, so they couldn't play it. I'd love to play a Dragon Meat because I thought Dragon Meat was an amazing, like out of all the ones I've done in the last year, I'd say Dragon Meat was one of the top that I really enjoyed. Everyone was so lovely, but they weren't playing the game with me, unfortunately.
That's fair.
But so that you've got the kind of community side with the public, and then you have what I think traditionally in other situations, as you said, more kind of where it's less community focused, it's seen as competitors, but actually the other publishers and designers are your support network. These are people who, and I'm part of several groups, and you're in some of them as well, but it's like, where we chat about stuff, we give each other advice, we give support. And we've all found that kind of support in those kind of places. And it's not even just about talking about the game or anything like that. It's talking about just like, your situations you're in, or, queries about like how to manage, this other situation whilst you're trying to do the Kickstarter or board game or something. And so it's very supportive in that respect. And I think and what's nice as well, because it's online, you don't have to worry about borders. You don't have to worry about locality. You can chat to a designer. I mean, literally last night I was playing the game with someone in Romania and someone in America, and that's 3 time zones. And if there was potentially going to be a German player who joined, that would have been 4 time zones. So, that's pretty amazing. And they were all, and they're creators as well. So it was kind of like a support network there. And I just think that's something that really has made this so worthwhile. And I think, regardless of what happens with the Kickstarter, regardless of what happens with in general with doing games on Kickstarter, I think we have all benefited from each other's support, and I think it's great.
I think that absolutely it's invaluable having the people playtest and give feedback, and there is no way I would have made any of the games that have been published. Well, I say no way, that's maybe a bit hyperbolic, but I doubt I would have made any of them had I not come to London from Glasgow. Because, yeah, Glasgow was great, and I loved that city. It's where I grew up, and I got to go out to weekly game nights, and there was another weekly game night where I used to play RPGs, and there was like a monthly game night that was trying to set it up. But this monthly game night that was trying to set up, it was like such a struggle, booking the pub, and then like, can we get enough players for this like one room? And I was hoping that it would be like 20, maybe even build into 30, but like we typically get like 8, which was okay. But so it's like, if we get like a couple more, then the pub will tell us to stop using their space. Do you know what I mean? And but in London, I came down and instantly there's London on board, meeting like basically every day of the week. And not only that, but there was Playtest UK, because I took a game to play at a board game night. But when you do that, it's kind of like an imposition. It's kind of like saying, hey, you came here to play published games. Would you be up for playing my game instead? And
Yeah.
some people might be okay with that, but it is still a thing. Whereas London, there's just such a big population density that whatever you want to do, you can probably find people to do it with. There was this monthly game night. I started, well, when I arrived, there were actually 2 monthly game nights, one from Playtest UK, one from a different group that sadly folded. And then Rob started on Mondays around the time that the other one folded. So there were always 2 a month. And then it was like, hey, let's start doing more Mondays. And then at a certain point when I was working, it's like, hey, let's start doing the daytime things. Because I'm not working daytimes, I'm typically working evenings because that's when they want you to work if you're working retail. And so I'm able to take this off. Let's try and have something. And then, starting now, we've got a weekly meetup that's every Friday from like 10 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. And that's the highlight of my week. And there was a time when I was like cycling down to Brighton to do a play test and then meeting some people and then cycling back up because I was time rich and cash poor relatively. But still, being in London, that's a massive thing. And there's just such a community that, yes, I helped cultivate that, but the people are here. It's a big city. And I think that's the privileges, the advantages that being in a big city gives you. But now everyone, if you can get your game onto something like Tabletopia or whatever, then people from all around the world can play this lovely thing with you.
Yeah. I ultimately it doesn't quite match up to the real deal. You know, it's slower, it's kind of clunky, and like, you know, in the case of Tabletop Simulator, you have to, you know, have a copy of the game, which, you know, is an instant paywall. But it is but there are some free ones, and then as well, it is something that ultimately people in our hobby tend to pick up because they want to have that opportunity. You know, they're not always going to be able to, you know, they might have the kids for the day, and that means in the evening they can't go out. They have to be in and play online instead of in person, or, you know, they might not have time around their work schedule to be able to commit to commuting, so they're going to have to, you know, so stuff like that. There's real kind of it fixes an issue with board gaming, which is sometimes people don't have the time to all meet up at the same place at the same time every week or something.
I feel like we should start winding down at this point. We have had a lovely chats about who you are and how you came to start making games and got into games. We've chatted a wee bit about music, and honestly, I would like to ask you, would you like to audition? What instruments do you play? And would you like to audition to be part of my band, which is going to play one gig at Aircon 2023? We're going to play a set of board game themed songs.
I mean, that's a very compelling offer. So I used to, well, I say used to, as in, so I've taken a bit of a break whilst I've been focusing on this, but mostly like jazz guitar and jazz piano. Both of those. And I did that for 10, 15 years. But yeah,
I mean, my stuff, I'm thinking of writing stuff that's a lot more simple melodies than jazz, to be honest. So, but like, if you can handle jazz, then come on board.
I mean, the problem with jazz is that, like, now you always have to make noise. Now you have to always be doing everything. Like, you know, that's I remember because I love folk music as well, and someone I was playing. I got into an impromptu jam at a LARP event, and basically they were playing these folk musicians who were like quite established were playing there, and we got playing together, and I remember being told off because I was playing too many jazzy notes, and I was like, oh, okay, I you know, there is a limit. Clearly, and so you know, but simple music is sometimes the best, you know.
But like, I'm not against, you know, people making noise and all going together, but yeah, seriously, are you up for it? Aircon 2023. Mark Hook's already agreed to give me the space. We're going to have like potentially maybe being a warm-up fact for Jolly Boats, or maybe being our own separate thing. We'll sing songs about board games, and it'll be like a series of songs that tell a narrative about someone trying to make a board game maybe and falling in love with games. I don't know.
So obviously I might be there in the capacity of demoing and exhibiting. But
Yeah,
then
yeah.
was
So will
this
I do. I mean,
yeah,
we're
was this
talking after hours. We're talking after trade
after
hours.
after like with the lights down low and kind of like the jazz club vibe.
Ooh, I like your
um
thinking.
Bez, like drop me some examples of what you're thinking of doing, and we can have a jam, like see if we can make something
You know
work.
what? How about maybe in July or September or sometime when you've got more time, let's actually get together physically and make some noises.
Yeah, that'd be really nice. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Josie, you should definitely come by and I feel like we should actually have a band where we can get together physically and practice. But like if you can get over to London, then I would love you to join in. And I think there's definitely lots of stuff to be written, but yeah, come over and if nothing else, then potentially funding out in London. I don't know, making music with people. So as we finish up, one section that I always like to ask is, what is it that you would like to ask me, or indeed ask anyone watching? Tom, question of the day, question of the day. It's a little question before we go on our way.
Bez, do you think you'll hit 100 games that you've released?
In my life, absolutely, yes.
And what would you do as a celebration for that?
Maybe make a game about making 100 games.
Of course. That's the perfect
And as
answer.
part of the game, you need to come up with 100 game ideas, and basically it's a deck of cards where you have different game ideas, and then people judge your game. Do people need to judge the game ideas? I don't know. Like that's just off the top of my head.
I think at the very least they need to kind of create the ideas or something. But
yeah, like they mash together things and then they do a quick pitch. It's kind of like Snake Oil, but for game design.
Or even that not that they judge it, but essentially they've made the game and then they have to attempt to play it, and then if it falls, if it's broken, if it doesn't work, then basically they don't get the point. Whereas if it actually ends up being that it functions to a certain point, then you actually get some sort of victory point for it.
So what you're suggesting is that it shouldn't just be like Snake Oil. No, that's not the 101st game. That's the 100th game. So that would be too late if it was the 101st game. That seems silly.
I mean, you don't want to miss that, because that would be really it wouldn't have the same impact at all if you were like, well, I'm at 103.
and also, how do you count which one's like a different game? I think I might just do it by Board Game Geek entries, even though that's not strictly correct, because Board Game Geek entries would include all the LDEC games that I've put up there, and it would also include a couple of expansions and stuff, but yeah.
And it's a difficult one to say, once you've sold, because ultimately, like, you don't want to have you don't have to want to always be selling your game. If that makes sense. You want people to play it for free at times. So it's,
I mean, like there was 2016.1a, which didn't have a better name. It's a memory game and flipping things over. It is a celebration of releasing the 100th, but then the 100th and the celebration come at the same time. It's synchronicity.
Yeah,
but yeah, I like what you're saying, Tom, where it's not just about riffing off the idea and saying the theme, but if I could actually make a game where by playing the game, you end up with a totally different game, and then you play it, and then it's like, this sounds very challenging to do, but kind of like Nomic, or kind of like 504, but you're actually adding bits to the game, and maybe you're combining cards and saying, okay, this is a bit like Flux, but with a lot more control and a lot more possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, like, I do wonder if there's ever a game that could literally just keep, because by that idea of being able to keep recreating a game within a game, could you just keep that game going forever? Where's the cutoff point at that point? Like, Bez, it's third day of UKG. We've made 54 games in this game. I can't do 55. And you're like, come on, we can do 55. Like, here we go. It's going to be essentially Snakes and Ladders with Pandemic. you know, oh god, you know, like okay, let's try it out, let's see how it goes, you know, and then it's like, okay, we've done that, 56, let's go, you know.
And the game has to be it probably needs a box. This can't just be a small cards game, but well, maybe I can get a bigger publisher to join in, maybe like someone who does weird stuff like Inside the Box or someone. But there's a sheet on it, like an achievement sheet, and then you write the names of each of your games once you've made them.
Yeah, that works. I just saw that comment down there. What number of games have you created so far? How long have you got to develop this? That is a really good question, but it's what number do you think you're on?
I think that Board Game Geek would say 36, but I am actually going to look it up. Is Shahriari, Board Game Geek, game designer, and if I look down, linked games is 33. Oh, so I've got to add on cute comical creatures and radishes because those are definitely different to the other games. So there will be 35 entries. I made a deliberate choice not to have promo cards up there because some people put promo cards, but that's just going to be silly if I put like every promo card that I make up there. And I feel like that's a bit sad. Like if there were thousands of people, like 50,000 people rated my game, I would then see a point of putting the promo card separately. If other people want to do that, put them separately, then great. But I think that with the popularity of my games, it's worth just having them as one entry. I don't think there needs to be an entire separate discussion forum for the UK Games Expo 2022 promo card, for example, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, you've just got another, 60 odd, 65?
Yeah, a long time. It'll be my, 10 years, whatever. But other people, when do you think that I will reach this milestone? Place your bets now. Bet start. I would bet thinking about, okay, I'm likely to keep up lots of games this year, and maybe next year I'll slow down, and then I'll go to Thailand for a while. I'll slow down, but I'll still be releasing like 2 or 3 a year. I'm going to say 2040. I think I will still be making games, and I think I will have done my 100th thing in the year 2040. That's what I'm guessing.
You realize we'll have to come back to this very situation. If I'm still kicking in 2040, I will be there too, and we can talk about your 100th game and then play a live stream of it.
I'm not guaranteeing that it's live streamable. I would almost envisage that it probably won't be because of the amount of drawing that you'll have to do on each other's things. I'm imagining little dry erase boards where you're actually making cards, but then the cards change. Josie guesses 2042. Do we have any other guesses? So at what year will Bez make game number 100 as defined by Board Game Geek entries?
I think clearly Josie's got the clear favourite. I mean, I think 24 is a good shout, definitely.
Okay. So at this point, Matt, congratulations on your haircut. Over to you. What are you up to? You can share personally if you want to. What are you up to? What's something you're looking forward to? Something that you want to do? Something you don't want to do, but you have to do anyway? Please do share. I promise that I care. I am going to take a good chunk of the day off. I'm going to try and do a lot of UK Games Expo preparation for a few hours, get games up there, put games into Board Game Geek, and send an email about the press preview because my games aren't showing up properly. And then I'm going to take the afternoon/evening off, celebrating a friend's birthday in the park. Hopefully the sun will come out. It's currently not blue at all. It's completely white with patches of grey.
We have the same situation here.
Okay, and then that is basically me for today. What are you up to, Tom?
So it sounds very similar actually. I'm going to be doing UKG prep, or buying a few things and booking a few things that might need to get done, and then it's going to be finishing up a few design things that I need to do for the wireframe for the Kickstarter, and then reply to a couple of emails from kind of different fulfillment houses, and then maybe this evening I might. Well, I say I won't do work. I'll probably be doing work, but it will be hopefully just kind of quite relaxed as I go along, and I'll kind of chill out and listen to music, and that's my kind of plan for the day.
That sounds awesome. And other people say that, Matt is going to do more UK Games Expo preparation for himself and going to the cinema with Rye. Yeah, that's the thing that I need to do. Sort out all my photos and send stuff to, peeps, to all the press people coming along. Not sure what to see yet. Josie is washing up on the line while it's not raining. Might walk into town and go to the park. Enjoy your day, everyone. I hope you have a lovely time. We have talked about so much today. We have talked about privileges of designing games full time, talked about how lockdown happened, about bereavement, about the satisfaction of getting stuff done, about Vincent and Maya and Joe.
Joe. Yeah.
Joe, who are helping. Very briefly, there will about relatively large games, but still not as massive as obviously lots of CMON or big box stuff. We talked briefly about haircuts. We talked about Kickstarter and Tea and Nick Habit podcast and Hiatus Coyote, Stone or Lavender. I will be listening to that after this show. Talks about breaking laws and running and exercise, about climbing a fence, about religion, about Space Crusade, music, maybe making some noises together. I would love to do that, genuinely. Making stuff as a lockdown project and having something that brings your friends together but then carries on bringing people together more and more. And about the community, indie campaigns versus the massive things like car cameras that are basically just an online shops. And then we talked about when I might do my 100th game. And our guesses have been so far 2040, 2041 from Poison Paint, and 2042 for Josie. But if anyone wants to go for 2039 right now, then they will be the closest. They could get the, I'm surprised no one went for that cheap answer of, clearly want to go for 2039 or 2043 and say, I was the closest at this point.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to say it, but I feel like I should now. It's the 2043.
Okay, you've got your... Okay, I'm writing this down. 2043, Tom, Poison Paint, Josie, okay. And so you chose to go late. That makes sense. I do agree it might be a bit optimistic, but we will see. We will see. I mean, now, if my next question is, where would you like people to find you? And if you can give a quick explanation of what your game is. We didn't really talk about how it plays or what's going on in this game.
That's fine.
So please tell all the people.
Yeah, so essentially it's a kind of medium weight area control game. It's quite very thematic, and it's essentially we are all different cults, basically trying to basically harvest souls, and we're trying to essentially murder in kind of wacky ways these decadent nobles and kind of quite often like cruel, selfish peasants, and basically you're in this horrible place where no one really is a nice guy, but you're the nice people basically. But there's a lot of resource management and hand management, and it's it's competitive, but it's not the kind of that's not like its core kind of component. But it's a lot of fun to make. It's been a lot of fun to make. It's been a lot of fun to demo, and people seem to enjoy it. So that's the kind of synopsis of the game. And then in terms of coming in, kind of like where to find me or Trolls and Rerolls, we're obviously on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, Trolls and Rerolls. And with the Kickstarter, I could sit here and say, oh yeah, back the game, but actually maybe it's not your cup of tea. But what does really help an indie publisher is just sharing it out there, basically. Just letting, because there will be people who will want it, but they might not see it. And for us indies, it's very difficult on a budget to kind of get the word out. So it's really helpful when people do that. So that if it's not your kind of cup of tea, just sharing it really, really helps.
And I just adore these creatures, these humans who have really embraced the slimes and decided, yes, merging ourselves with slimes is 100% the way forward.
Yeah, Vincent's great. He's such a good artist, and yeah, when you say to someone, I need you to make a sewer-based slime cult that's pink, go, and then it comes back with things like this. It's amazing.
I would love to talk to Vincent about their drawing techniques at some point, because that is just lush, the colors and the line work and the details and everything. I mean, there's enough details to make it look cool, but not too many to distract you, if you know what I mean. It's still got a really solid. I didn't even notice the poo until a bit later on.
Yeah, there's subtle things as well. I actually messaged him the other day, and bear in mind, I've looked at these pictures a million times, and I was like, wait, you've got this little thing here. What does that mean? And suddenly, it completely changed the whole story behind this image, and I was like, how did I not clock that? So yeah, he's really good at kind of putting in these little kind of subtle kind of bits that kind of when you notice them, you're like, wow, that's completely changed my perspective on this. But he's actually a farmer by day. He is he's based in Northern Ireland, and he literally sends me pictures of him rearing animals and bringing life into the world. And kind of driving around in a tractor, and he has a horse. He loves his horse, so he's living this amazing life. And then in the evening, he's sitting in this kind of darkened room making these kind of weird, wacky characters for the game. So very cool.
And I completely forgot that we also talked about UK Games Expo, of course. But yeah, we talked about so much. And if people want to check it out, of course, Trolls and Rerolls, go check out the Kickstarter, I should say. With things like this, if you back for £1, then it does obviously help. I mean, those £1 pledges really help Kickstarter go up the rankings. And on day one, I would rather have 5 people back for £1 than have one person back for a tenner or for the whole game.
100%, and that's just the nature of crowdfunding and kind of the algorithms they use, stuff that they try and push up projects that have as many backers as they can, and that's the kind of weird and wonderful game that we have to play, which if you have lots and lots of money, you can maybe make that a lot easier, but that's the whole importance of community. So yeah, 100%, I completely agree. That's the best way of doing it.
And if you want to check me out, then I am, of course, I want to say all the places I am, even on TikTok, even though I don't post there, stuffbybez.com, stuffbybez.bakecartel.com, where I will be overhauling that in the summer, twitter.com/stuffbybez, instagram.com/stuffbybez, twitch.tv/stuffbybez, where I stream every day at 10 a.m. UK time. YouTube for the old episodes is good, stuffbybez.com/discord. And if you want to find out what those new episodes are going to be, go to this link. And tomorrow I will be chatting with Pearl Ho, another indie publisher setting up their first game, Cake of Doom. And there's a really nice theme. I will talk about games and life and everything in between. We have met once at Playtest UK weekend event. It'll just be really nice to meet and chat. It'll be somewhat similar to this one. If you've enjoyed it, then please tune in again. And Monday, I will be doing a bunch of solo instructions to help my helpers to go through the rules of all my games, and yeah, as best as I can with just me. But share, spread the word. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for watching, for all the thoughts, for all the comments and questions, and most importantly, thank you, Tom.
No worries. No, that's thank you for having me, Bez.
It's been a delight. And for now, the only thing left to say is bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song to do. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. And bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye-bye, Tom.
Bye, Bez.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye, Vinci.